So here's an example video about the poetic tendencies of E. E. Cummings. The first category that I'll look at is tension. So tension having to do with the main uh, content of each poem, as most poems are centered around something unresolvable, and his poems are certainly no different in that way, although they're very unique in many ways. So looking at the three poems, Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town, The Cambridge Ladies Who Live in Furnished Souls, and As Freedom is a Breakfast Food, which are very different poems but have similarities. All three of these poems center around an inability to hold on to something very messy but very beautiful about life, something unruly and wonderful. A conflict between this and the mundanity or conformity that life presents, and then also this sort of conformity versus freedom and wild oddness. An example line from the Cambridge Ladies is the first line, the Cambridge ladies who live in furnished souls are unbeautiful and have comfortable minds. So this is presented as the thing which the speaker of the poem is judging, is opposing, being someone who is a furnished soul, kind of implying stodginess, and having a comfortable mind, unadventurous, probably predictable, boring, etc. And then imagery. So the imagery of Cummings' poems is nursery rhyme-like. He is sometimes criticized for being overly simplistic, maybe nonsensical, maybe not worthy of being considered an elite poet. However, many people enjoy his poems as well. Of course, this is a choice we all make. Though, in addition to being simple, childlike, odd, it's also often soothing, optimistic, simple but distinct, much like a avant-garde, his poetry is called, or a surrealist painting, jarring but also soothing. From the Cambridge Ladies, sometimes in its box of sky lavender and cornerless, the moon rattles like a fragment of angry candy. From Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town, oops. When by now and tree by leaf she laughed his joy, she cried his grief. Bird by snow and stir by still, anyone's any was all to her. And as freedom is a breakfast food, as hat racks into peach trees grow. So he likes doing this too, which is perhaps more of a diction thing, although it's also an image, to make up his own words or to punctuate or format words in a way that he chooses, like hat racks is one word and peach trees is one word. If you put his poems into a Word document, you have lots of red squiggly lines underneath. And then the tone of his poems can vary, but it's often eccentric, definitely informal, dreamlike, in pursuit of the above-mentioned kinds of conflicts between self-expression and conformity. In Cambridge Ladies, he judges the ladies by explaining that they have permanent faces that coyly ban the scandal of Mrs. N and Professor D, judging their preoccupations. He says they're invariably interested in so many things, which sounds also judgmental, almost mocking. And diction, eccentric, bordering on nonsensical. Each word combination makes you really think about what he meant on each occasion. It's so unusual that you almost have to revisit the word's meaning afresh, as if you're learning the word for the first time. He calls the Cambridge Ladies' souls furnished. He calls them unbeautiful, says they have delighted fingers, unusual. It's a personification of fingers to call them delighted, I suppose. Lavender and cornerless. Common is rare and millstones float in As Freedom is a Breakfast Food. So he's doing pairs of opposites there to bring up millstones, to say that common, to treat common like a noun here. Common's rare, even though common is an adjective. He often changes parts of speech. And then often unconventional punctuation, even more so than other poems. All poems have the freedom to be strange and unconventional with punctuation and syntax and so on, but he usually is even odder than other poets. Uses lots of figurative language. And then finally, his worldview is that something like life is absurd, it's important to pay attention to, it's beautiful, individuality is precious, very much believes in love, and believes in honesty and against hypocrisy, which many poets share that perspective. Be suspicious of the norm. And the whole poem that I'll quickly show as Freedom is a Breakfast Food. So you can pause it to read it if you, rather than taking your time to read it aloud, and then unpause and I'll point some things out about it. So he develops pairs of opposites here. Truth can live with right and wrong. Hat racks into peach trees go. Every finger is a toe. Any courage is a fear. And you can read them as interesting oppositions that just develop imagery, develop tone, are fun and odd and ridiculous and somewhat meaningless. But if you look overall, he is saying that despite these seemingly completely opposed ideas, he does not believe in the opposites that he's presenting. He believes these things that he comes to at the conclusion of the poem. Love is the sky, and I am for you just so long and long enough. That life is full of contradictions, but the things that are true are relationships. The things mentioned before about his feelings about worldview, that life is beautiful, love is real, oddness is important. Don't be afraid of contradictions, find your own truth kind of thing. And of course, as the title suggests, which also supports nonconformity. Freedom is a breakfast food. Freedom is essential. Also very American. All right, that's an example, longer than it needs to be, screencast on E.E. Cummings.